Hello, welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I'm your host, Corey Nathan, and let's get right to it. I am so happy to be joined today by two wonderful guests, friends, actually. Lori Adams Brown is a business and nonprofit executive and the host of A World of Difference. That's a wonderful podcast about how our differences make us stronger. And Will Chan Wright, you've heard both of these folks before. Will is a U.S. Army veteran and has been co-hosting Faithful Politics, a podcast about politics, faith, and their intertwined impact on society. Lori, Will, so good to be with you all again. How you
Thanks
doing?
for having us back.
You,
So fun
you
to
guys
be
know
here
each
with
other.
you guys.
We've all been on together before, haven't we?
We have, yeah.
Yeah.
I knew this was a good idea. So one of the things I should let folks know is I'm not sure, but I think this is actually our 300th episode. So kind of a cool deal that I get to celebrate it with you.
Woohoo! Congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I can't believe we've been doing it this long and that we haven't been kicked off the air yet, but here we are.
Yeah, Yet's doing a lot of work there.
So one of the one of the reasons I wanted to have Lori and Will on is because we're at about 6 months into Trump 2.0. There have also been certain things happening in the American church, and I just thought it would be good to check in and do something special, do a roundtable. So I guess the first question I'll start with for each of you, maybe Lori, if you don't mind starting, at this 6 month mark of Trump 2.0. What concerns did you have once we knew he was elected that are now coming to fruition?
Oh, it would be more than the entire podcast for me to list all of them, but I will give you the most pressing ones for me. I do believe that he came through on his campaign promises of deporting a lot of our immigrant neighbor friends, coworkers, and that's happening. And I grew up in Venezuela, which maybe I mentioned before when I was on the podcast, but it seems as though he has a specific vendetta toward my Venezuelan friends, a place that I found to be a very beautiful upbringing in the 80s and 90s. And having people come here under the Chavez and now the Maduro regime and seek asylum here and get jobs and work and build businesses and build their families and suddenly be sent to El Salvador. That was a bit of a shock. I would say that was a curveball. We expected them to be deported to Venezuela, but they got many of them framed as part of Tren de Aragua, which is a gang. I grew up in Carabobo State, and Aragua is the next state to mine. And I even had friends in my international school that lived in Aragua. Is that close? So that gang is real. Are they involved in global human trafficking and all those allegations? It doesn't appear from intelligence that they're that big, but and they don't have gang tattoos. But apparently, somebody with an autism tattoo supporting his brother, who's Venezuelan, got sent to El Salvador, to one of the worst prisons in the world. And so, yeah, those campaign promises he came through on, and those really are the things that keep me up at night. The things that really I don't know how to fix or help, and I want to. And so, yeah, that's a big one for me.
Yeah, yeah. It's man, there are a number to list, but and it can seem overwhelming because we think about big problems. Your podcast is A World of Difference, so we think about the world, and it can seem overwhelming to think about it in those terms. One thing that I've been finding helpful is to think super locally, and by super locally, I mean like literally my actual neighbors. The people that I run into at the local pub, or the people I run into at the coffee shop or at church. We actually had a conversation at church on Sunday about, well, what is our policy if ICE comes to our church?
Yeah.
What is the official policy? What can we each as parishioners do? Because we have folks that, the illegals as they're, but folks that, maybe don't have the proper, the documentation. But what do we as parishioners do? What can church staff do? What's the official policy? The fact that we had to have this conversation and imagine this possibility, it's not just a possibility, it's real. It's happened to our neighbor churches, like within,
Yeah.
spitting distance of our church. So it's very
Yeah.
possible that this can
Well, it's real
happen.
for us here in California, isn't it?
Yeah.
These are our neighbors in California. And when he got rid of the TPS program, which helped Venezuelans and Afghans here in like the Fremont area where I work come here after they were fleeing governments that were terrorizing them. And America's been known for this for many years. And to put people who are legally here and suddenly take away the TPS status and make them illegal, that was next level nefarious in my perspective. And so, yeah, it's bad for our economy here in California, which we are the fourth largest economy in the world. We surpassed Japan. So Japan's number five, we're number four as a state. It's affecting our food, that goes all around the United States from here and the world, really. It's bad for business. It's bad for our country. It's bad for us as community. It's bad on many levels. It doesn't seem as though it was ever just about this quote unquote illegal immigrant. And by the way, illegal means this is like a misdemeanor, like a parking ticket.
Yeah.
So if you've ever had a parking ticket, then I guess you're also illegal.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, and it speaks to other issues as well. I mean, whether we're talking from a Christian perspective or from a legal perspective, I've some of the most heated exchanges I've been on whether it's in person or some of the threads that we moderate. It started by simply quoting scripture or simply quoting Leviticus 19, the end of the chapter comes to mind, or quoting directly from the Constitution, First Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Fourth Amendment, 14th Amendment. The idea that I can just literally, with no commentary, just quote from the 14th. And some of my friends who are big Trump supporters, their hair is on fire. It's crazy. But it does speak to the notion that one of my concerns is the very concrete way that our constitutional order and our constitutional rights are being threatened, are being circumvented. So, but I don't want to hijack the entire show here. Will, I'm going to ask you the same question. 6 month mark, Trump 2.0. What concerns did you have once you knew that Trump was elected that are now coming to fruition?
Oh gosh. I would say there's probably a handful of them. And before I use my number one,
Yeah.
I just want to add on to the conversation that you guys were talking about with the immigration
Yeah.
stuff.
Thank you. I didn't mean to cut you out of that part. So please, yeah.
So, and maybe I can feed two birds with one stone here, because I think that there are two things that kind of surprise me. One, the Lincoln Riley Act that was signed early on, 6 months ago, I guess. I was really, really doubtful that it would really do anything substantive because we were already at a place in the United States where we couldn't house enough migrants, and I was and the Lincoln Riley Act essentially, kind of like opens up, the entire legal system and say, hey, if you have a parking ticket, you're basically going to go to jail. That part, didn't really surprise me. What surprised me was what you all were talking about. Like, yeah, we don't have enough room in the jails. So where are we going to send them? We're going to send them to a completely different country. I think that part really, really surprised me. And then the other part that surprised me kind of in the same vein was early on. I mean, nobody remembers, what happened in January. Because like you say Trump 2.0, I swear I'm like on Trump 8.0 at this stage. But early on, Trump signed an executive order that rescinded a bunch of protections that migrants had in this country, and also protections for certain institutions. Some of those institutions that had protections were churches, were courthouses, were schools, and stuff like that. So a lot of the presence that you're seeing with ICE, can point back to that executive order that he signed. So, when a lot of people are like, why are they in churches? Why are they? I mean, it's because like that was like 700 news cycles ago, and we've just all forgotten. And if there's anything that I think we can do collectively, is just make sure people don't forget, especially
Mhm.
as we get closer to an election. So, um, yeah, yeah. So back to your original question, I'm being like a reporter, right? Like asking or answering two questions or something like that. I'll try to make it quick
Okay.
because when we started talking about coming on the show, you're asking us for ideas, and I'm like, oh, what do I want to talk about? I thought I'd want to talk about something related to Christian nationalism or something in that vein. So I was just thinking, I was making a list of all the different ties where faith and politics have just gotten a little bit closer, if not completely mended. and and since 2025, it's like I probably could have kept going, but it's like, we have an anti-Christian bias task force, we have the launch of Religious Liberty Commission, we have dismantling of federal DEI programs, which is Christian National Agenda, dismantling of the Department of Education, school choice funds going towards religious schools based off the One Big Beautiful Bill that just passed, Oklahoma's religious social studies curriculum, um, book bans targeting guests that have been on our show, Robbie Jones and Anthea Butler. um, Christian only towns created in Tennessee. The rise of a Doug Wilson church being planted in DC. That's a church that Pete Hegseth belongs to. Minnesota shooter linked to Christian nationalism, Russell Vaught. I mean, I really could go on. But the one thing that gets me out of all of that is Chip and Joanna Gaines getting beat up because of their show. And I'm like, whoa, I did not see that coming. I mean, I don't know. Like that just really surprised me. I mean, as a Cypress Hill fan and a fan of their show, all I'm going to say is that like when the ship lap goes down, they better be ready. They better
So
be
for folks that aren't as cool as you, the Chip Gaines, what is it? The Chip and Diana?
Chip
Joanna.
and Joanna.
Joanna Gaines?
Lori's filling me. Lori's filling me.
Yeah, they have, my understanding is there's a gay couple, is that right? That have
Mhm.
a show on their network. So just the fact that this couple exists and they're gay and they have a show on a network with people who profess to be Christian, have a lot of Christian followers, is upsetting that they exist and that they're on the show. That's my understanding, unless it's more than that.
It's based. I mean, like Franklin Graham is posting about it. I mean, Matt Walsh
I
entered the
saw a Matt Walsh post
conversation.
about it. I didn't know what the reference was, but so here's what boggles my mind. Like, there are so many things to get concerned and upset about. I guess I am not attuned to what that is. And on either side of it. So for example, this thing, I guess if I knew about the show and that's kind of predictable based on what, for lack of a better word, certain obsessions that some of the guys I used to go to church with, what their obsessions are. So that's a little bit more predictable. What I couldn't have predicted is that if we trace back now 10 years and look at all of the opportunities to take the exit ramp from the Trump train, like this, the absent, like wait, so the John McCain not being a real hero thing. No, that wasn't it. Grab him by the private parts. That didn't do it for you. I mean, I could talk about going down a list. Like there is a daily list of opportunities for an exit ramp, but the Epstein, like, so the conspiracy theory, like I don't get it. I guess I don't know my people.
I,
I don't.
I,
Yeah.
I get it.
I mean, honestly, the what shocked me is Mike Johnson, the Southern Baptist, third in line to the presidency, going after this today. I grew up Southern Baptist. I was Southern Baptist for over 40 years, left them because of the abuse and lack of really caring to do much about it. So just couldn't, my conscience didn't allow me to stay in that denomination. But to see that Mike Johnson, of all the things that 34 felonies, the very credible sexual assault allegations that weren't even brought, as far as those were. And it's the Epstein files that is really, it's, so I mean, well, by the time this releases, will we know more? I don't know. But these abuses were hidden in plain sight all along. He says things anybody knows who understands abuse. And if you're in a church community, you've likely heard about abuse in a church at this point because it's so common, whether you're Catholic or Protestant, any of the denominations. But one of the things we know is what's known is usually just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Right.
And so if people say things in front of the curtain that are that wild and outlandish, like grabbing them by private parts, what they say behind the curtain is always worse.
Yeah.
And we have this, 2016, we had Katie Johnson, a pseudonym here in California. 2016, she filed sexual assault against, Trump when she was 13 on, I guess, Love Island, Epstein. She was trafficked by Epstein and, made these claims that Trump assaulted her. It's court record. It's very graphic. I've read it twice and it just makes me sick to my stomach. This 13-year-old girl, very violent sexual assault by Trump to this child. And then it just got dropped when he was running in 2016. It appears as though she was likely intimidated, coerced, some form of that, but she's pretty much disappeared in terms of her voice in the public sphere. But she's one of the ones who actually went to court over it. And that, if you understand anything about these situations, for a child who is even years later, even to do that is a huge deal. And they quickly get, voices get squashed. But these things are public records. So for Mike Johnson to be all after the Epstein files today and saying Pam Bondi needs to release all this kind of thing, that was shocking to me. I just didn't think there'd be anything that would really bother them, especially along these lines. What about you guys?
So just to reset the story, I'm going to read directly from Ground News, which I found to be a really helpful resource. Their summary I'll read from, but if you go to ground.news, and I've been recommending this site to a lot of viewers. There are basically these little pills of all different kinds of treatments of the same story from left, center, and right-leaning publications. But their summary from this is updated 4 hours ago as we're recording this on Wednesday. What's the day? The 18th?
16,
Is it the 18th?
16.
Oh,
16.
16th. Okay,
You're
sorry.
2 days ahead.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's been one of those weeks. So this week has been one of those days. Speaker Johnson breaks with Trump, calls for DOJ to release Epstein files. House Speaker Mike Johnson said the White House and Justice Department should put everything out there and let the people decide it regarding unreleased files from the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Trump continued to insist without evidence that the unreleased Epstein files were doctored by political rivals like former FBI Director James Comey and Presidents Barack Obama and Joe Biden. House Republicans blocked an effort by Democrats to require Attorney General Pam Bondi to release the unreleased Epstein files in a party line vote. So, yeah, to your point, so many intertwined stories here. First of all, I it it is it's a proclivity I found in discussion of this story to almost forget that there are real human beings that are victims, right? I think that should be kept prominent in our area of concern. But all of the questions. I was talking to a fellow who got his PhD in ethics. He came up as a Navy SEAL and ultimately studied ethics, taught ethics at the Naval Academy in Annapolis. And he was asking the question. We were talking about a different story, having Marines, in addition to the federal troops deployed here in LA. Some of those Marines were Marines that he trained because he ran he was training upcoming SEALs. And one of the questions he was asking about that was, what what does this do to us, to our character? And what does this do? And expand that out. What does this do to our character as a community, as a country, right? So what is by numbing ourselves to the human toll, by almost like not, I don't know, glorifying or turning this into spectacle. What is this? To what degree are we numbing our collective conscience? You know,
Mm.
that's what worries me. You know, and I think when we ask the question, how could Trump have gotten elected again? You know, with 82% support from our brothers and sisters in the, at least the white evangelical church here in the States. And I think maybe it has to do with the slow degrading numbing of our collective conscience. I'm not trying to be too philosophical about it, but
No, I definitely think that you're onto something. I think that when empathy starts to become toxic and grief becomes like sensationalized, then like who we are as humans just starts to look different, you know? And I think that you can see that, like, and people can feel it. And I think that with the Epstein thing, I mean, like put Epstein aside, like those that are the most vocal about wanting to see the Epstein files, you know, we may call them conspiracy theorists at QAnon, but at the core of that belief is sort of a care response to something happening to children, whether it's the Democrats or whether it's whoever, you know, like Democrats, I think actually have that same care and concern. Just we may not necessarily think that there's some, you know, dark cabal that's doing it. I've been working on a draft of a blog to think about like this is not a moment to you know, further divide ourselves. Like we can find common ground on this Epstein issue, as strange as that sounds, you know, like, like we all, I think, universally just want kids to not be sex trafficked, you know, like the conservatives have kind of like hijacked it, you
yeah.
know, to make it like a conservative issue, but it's not. It's kind of like there are certain like racist things that don't make sense to me. Like I'm black, so people are like, you like to eat watermelon. I'm like, yeah, I bet so do you, right? You know, like, and I'm like, why is that a racist thing? You know, watermelon's delicious. Let's just be honest. You know, so it's like with the Epstein thing, you know, I think that we can find common ground, and I hope that there's enough political will to do it. But then to your point, Lori, about like, why is this the thing that's going to like break the camel's back. And for me, I think it's not so much why for me as it is it's revealing that this was a core moral foundation for this group. And it was a pillar that they have sort of like predicated all their other sort of beliefs around. I mean, if you're familiar with like the Jonathan Haidt model, you know, like this belief is the elephant and everything else is the rider.
Is
Uh,
it so? Is it really? So I am familiar with that. Okay, so wait. So this thing, this conspiracy theory that's been baking, and I understand it's this particular one is one of the central ones to the Q theory, the QAnon theories, and all that. But so this is like maybe I guess I really don't understand. So this is the elephant. This is one of those two or three big pillars that's holding up the whole structure.
I mean, obviously, I'm no, you know, like moral psychologist or anything like that, but kind of as I prefaced it, that there is a care and concern element that's universal. That's why a lot of liberals that who voted for Biden or Obama went Q because like they were convinced that, you know, there were babies that are being sex trafficked or something like that, you know, and their tear ducts were being harvested for adreno, so whatever, you know. Have you heard this?
No.
I'm probably in too deep.
It's wild. I mean, Pizzagate was bad enough where they accused Hillary Clinton of going to this DC restaurant and assaulting children. And that, I guess there was a Southern Baptist deacon from North Carolina at one point that drove up there where the son was going to shoot her, and he opened the door and it was just a pizza parlor.
Just a pizza
Just a
place.
pizza parlor.
Just making pizza. Oh man, I have so many questions.
Hey,
Yeah,
I want to ask you a question though, Corey, because
yeah.
like you didn't tell us like what's the one thing that surprised you like in the past 6 months, you know, with the new administration, Trump 9.0, you know, like what's the one thing that you're like, huh, didn't see that one coming.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of what's happening isn't surprising from the Trump administration. I think what's surprising, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but the either numbness or genuine enthusiasm for not just the execution of the policies, but the way that the policies are being executed by close friends of mine. They're cheering some of this on, you know? So Mike Madrid put out a piece a few days ago on the Great Transformation, his Substack, about there was a Pew poll that is a direct it's taking election data directly, and tracking with voters sentiment, people who actually voted right in the last election. Now, a lot of folks that did end up deciding the election, we look at, okay, so why did 80 million vote for Joe Biden in 2020, but only 73 or so voted, 73 million vote for Kamala? Why did 74 million people vote for Trump in 2020, but then 77 million voted for him in 20? So the difference between those numbers, right? We look for the difference in those numbers, right? And so those millions of people, the 7 million people that Kamala didn't get, and the 3 million extra people that Trump did get between 2020 and 2024. And a lot of the reasons, economy, people felt like during Trump 1.0, their feeling was that the economy was doing better under Trump than under Biden. I had problems with that because when you look at the actual numbers, I took issue with that. But I couldn't go to 7 million people or 4 million people or any million people and say, but don't you are you looking at the actual, it didn't work that way. People felt that things were not as good under Biden than they were under Trump. And then the other thing was immigration, and folks wanted closed borders, wanted to do something about the borders. It felt like there were so many immigrants pouring over the border, right? So what surprises me is that, okay, so there are many less people that are crossing the border now. That problem has been largely addressed. If you saw it, that's not an issue for me. I know a lot of my friends have legitimate reasons why they were concerned about it. It's not for me, but that's neither here nor there. But even the folks who did think of it as a major, major problem, those concerns have been largely allayed. But the same, when you actually ask the folks, not the folks who are hardcore, MAGA, not the folks who are hardcore in Trump's base, that 30 to maybe 33% that are hardcore, but the folks that I'm talking about that moved the election from 2020 to 2024. Those folks, largely, the numbers for their support for the way they're executing immigration policy, for the raids that we're talking about, for child separation, for the stories that we're seeing on a daily basis. A 9-month pregnant, a pregnant woman, 9 months pregnant, is being violently detained and having to go to the hospital because of her the way that she was treated by ICE. And this is a daily story. Unfortunately, if it's up to Stephen Miller, it's 3,000 times daily story that's happening. So that's what folks aren't supportive of. But to answer your question, what I'm surprised at is how many of my friends do support it, are cheering it on, are perfectly happy with alligator Alcatraz.
Alcatraz.
Yeah. So that's what surprises me. It befuddles me. It frustrates me to no end. And I wonder if part of it isn't how I'm thinking of specific people right now. I wonder if part of it isn't how they genuinely feel about that particular issue, but it's what they are presenting because of how they've been made to feel by who they perceive to be their political adversary. So to put meat on those bones, to paint that picture, I know one person, a lot of his political passions are inflamed by the feeling that he has that people have been telling him what he can say, how he should think, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and basically being scolded by a lot of people around him, what he would call woke or DEI or whatever. And he just got to the end of his rope. And he's tired of it. So now a lot of this is kind of expressing his pent-up frustration over these last several years of what he's seen as being scolded just for thinking the wrong way or saying the wrong word. so now if he, you know, puts out on Facebook, hooray for Alligator Island, I hope they eat all of them, kind of a thing, or in person, to him it's the equivalent of being at a Dodger game and cheering for the Dodgers and saying Giants suck, So to him, it's a whole bunch of, it's just talking crap. So I don't know. That's a longer answer to your question, but that part of it is that if you're asking me what surprised me, that's that's what surprises me, and I can't get my head around. Sorry, Lori. I feel like I filibustered there, but
I know you're onto something. I didn't grow up here in the United States. I grew up as a U.S. citizen overseas and voted many times overseas at embassies or mailing my ballot in from the rural parts of Sumatra and other places. But I have noticed this very, a subculture within America in the United States where it's this very binary type thinking. You're either for the Giants or you're for the Dodgers, or in Alabama, you're for Auburn or you're for
Alabama.
Alabama. You're
Yeah.
either black or you're white. There's just these, you're Protestant or you're Catholic. There's just these two options, and there's these tribal type thinking, and it's a competition to win. And so when you see this two-party system, it plays into it with some people in that way, where it's about winning and scapegoating and talking trash. But kind of circling back to what we were talking about before, when these people aren't in your lives, when they aren't actually your neighbors, when you don't know their kids and you don't know that woman's pregnant, like when these are just people off in Alcatraz that you don't know personally, it's so much easier to, I guess, talk schmack or whatever to them. But these are real people. These are actual babies in utero that will die. And if it is true that this elephant or whatever is this, the children, if we, that is our common ground, is the children. I have many evangelical friends who identify as pro-life, and they're one issue voters, and this is what they vote about is abortion. So they're cheering, when jobs happen, and not digging much into the nuance, or the data that abortions go up and all these other things that a lot of us, who do research that more tend to. It's not about that. It's about, it feels tribal. And so I can see what you're talking about. I think it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, what I'll start with you this time, Will. What have you seen in our civic life that maybe gives you hope?
What gives me hope? I was afraid you were going to ask that question.
By the way, I'm going to give you a second. I want to pause here for a second
Hmm.
because, and you can think of your answer, but I think it's worth pointing out that all three of us could have been considered, or probably were considered, conservatives. Whether we're conservative, we'd be considered conservative theologically, conservative politically at different points in our lives. Is that fair to say? I mean, I'm now considered a left of left liberal activist, and it's not based on my actual political how I actually vote. It's based on two things, and the first one is that I don't hate liberals enough, and that's really the main one. I don't
Mm.
hate liberals enough, so I've long been considered a liberal because I don't hate liberals enough. And two has to do with Trump is that I've been a vocal, opponent of not Trump, but his words, his actions, and his character that he exhibits on a daily basis. So I
Hmm.
make that very clear, and I also make clear that it's not people who find a reason to vote for Trump. I have dear, dear friends that voted for Trump, whether it was, once, twice, three times. So, but that is the reason is that I've said this many times. I can read pretty much any page of my Bible, and I read it every day. It testifies against the words, actions, character, Donald Trump. But that's that very thing, and the fact that I don't hate liberals enough is. But is that fair to say? Have you all been? If we're thinking objectively, not about conservative as it's defined on Fox News, but conservative as it's been defined from Edmund Burke through G.K. Chesterton through William F. Buckley to Thomas Sowell, uh, you know, politically and or theologically, isn't it fair to say that we all could be considered or should have been considered conservative from a different angles? Or am I thinking, you know, am I thinking too hard about it?
Me, I think you're thinking too hard about it.
But
Uh,
your theology is fairly conservative.
I don't really know if that's an accurate way how I would describe it. I mean, I've come a long way on how I describe my theology, and I've moved away from defining it in like political terms because I used to consider myself a progressive Christian. I read something, really started thinking more about like what it is and how it sort of conflicts with me not really wanting to have faith and politics be so intermeshed together. and I was just contributing to it. So I would say my theology is my theology, and that's just I just believe that Jesus was a real dude and he did what people said he did, like.
You
And
just thought of the next set of merch you're going to be sending out. Jesus was a real dude. Put it on a t-shirt, start
I'll buy
selling
it.
that.
should do that. Yeah. Yeah, but no, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call myself because I mean, I like guns, so maybe that makes me kind of a conservative, but I'm also like an ex-infantry guy, so I don't know. Like, what are you a conservative, Lori?
I've never labeled myself that way. It sort of just depends. Like I grew up in all overseas, and so it was different. And so I guess in my international school, some people would have seen me as conservative that were from the United States or maybe from Europe, because of my faith and how that looked. But I've never. I am an independent, so I've not registered with either party. All that being said, started voting in the when I was in, I guess, my senior year in the early 90s, and vote have only ever voted for a Democrat for US president. So that being said, I guess a lot of my evangelical friends would have labeled me liberal. In fact, the pastor at the church where I worked here in San Jose looked at me one day and called me a liberal. And I didn't mind it so much. It's just that it felt like it was a slur or name calling from him.
Yeah.
And so,
Maybe
yeah, I just don't know that I mean, I don't know that I've defined myself in those ways. Depends on what group I'm in. To some I'm liberal, to some I'm conservative, and I haven't really bothered to label myself.
you know what? You all have a much healthier way to handle that. I think the reason that I've bristled against being called a liberal is one, the folks that label me a liberal, I know to them being liberal is not a good thing. So
Yeah.
that's why I've bristled at it. But two is I'm not a liberal. Like if I
Yeah.
was one, then it like yeah, sure. If it's something that I was, I'd own it, and I wouldn't take issue with it. Um, but I know, like, listen, I don't know if I've ever shared this. I voted for Gary Johnson in 2016. Um, I then reassessed because I didn't want to vote because I had the luxury of voting in California and it was predetermined. So I decided to start voting as if I was in Pennsylvania or Arizona
Mhm.
at the top of the ticket. So then I did vote for Biden in 2020. I voted for Kamala in 2024. But Romney Ryan, I love that ticket. I mean, Paul Ryan it was one of my favorite political figures, in the 21st century. But even in that election, folks thought that I was what they call me, dyed in the wool Democrat, and it's because I didn't hate Barack Obama enough. Like I said, listen, I think he's done an okay job. I don't think he deserves to be fired. I just happen to like Romney Ryan better. The funny thing is now Romney has emerged as someone who I favor more, and Ryan, for various reasons, has descended on my scale of favorability. Yeah, but that's when I started to notice it in 2012. Why do you think I'm a? Not that it's a bad thing. I mean, both my parents are Democrats, but why do you think? Well, I just thought you loved Barack Obama. I'm like, well, no, I don't hate Barack Obama. I think he has done a fine job. I just, so I don't know. Maybe I'm just my
It's all
beef
about who
is.
you hate, I guess,
It
right?
is. Yeah,
That
yeah.
that's true. Well, I really appreciate you filibustering there for me.
Yeah. Killing time
'Cause
for you to come up with a good answer. What are
I
you hopeful for? It takes a lot of time to think about it, doesn't it?
It does.
These days.
Well, in the time that you were talking, I've had a chance to actually put together a pretty impressive thesis with written in MLA format. I've got my citations here. So
Wow.
It's amazing what Gemini deep research can do for you.
let me begin. No, there are a few things I'm hopeful for, but it's like I really have to dig for them, to be honest. I mean, I've sort of been pounding the pavement since January 20th. And I'd like to just remind everybody, it's still year one. So like
I
save
just got a
your
big old
fuel.
pit in my stomach.
Save your
Dear Lord.
fuel. Pick your battles,
Yeah.
because like there's 4 years from now, and shame on the Democrats because like Biden would have been impeached like 5 times already.
Oh yeah.
But with that said, the things that give me hope. Sometimes I think it's important, especially when we have such strong negative feelings for somebody, that we dig for that little nugget that that humanizes them. Um, and the last presidential election, we had the opportunity to talk to Chase Oliver. He was the top of the ticket for a libertarian. Great guy, actually. Like, and I'm finding myself agreeing with him more and more these days. But um, the last question I asked him was like, say something good about each of the other two presidential candidates. And he did a phenomenal job. And he seemed sincere. And he actually, he seemed a little like taken back by the question. uh, And I forgot what he said about Kamala, but the thing he said about Trump was something about the right to try bill that he put forth, is like that could have some, positive effects for people that are in their last days or whatever and want to try something. I'm like, you know what? Like, that's great. Like, I never thought of that. But in this administration, we can really lose sight of some of the positives that come out of the negative headlines. So, like in the one big beautiful bill, the no tax on tips. Sure, it affects a very small portion of Americans and it will likely be abused in some way or form. But for the people that are in the bottom 10% of the pay scale in America, it's probably going to be great. And maybe it will, boost that industry. Maybe it'll create pathways for them to move into other sort of jobs if they see fit. I really think that, focusing on the least of these, and how they're actually going to benefit, helps me view Trump not as like the evil incarnate, but just, bad people can sometimes do things that help good people. And I think just focusing on that is really, really hopeful.
Mm, okay. I'm gonna have to get my head around that, but I see where you're coming from. What about you, Lori?
Well, in terms of what it's done, you talked about just the people right in front of you. I think I've seen a lot of people take that posture, to say, we don't know how this is going to go. Will there be a midterms we can vote in? We don't know. That maybe the Constitution will be rewritten and we won't vote again. And there's, all that fear. And so, what I saw a lot of people in my community here in the Bay Area start to do is just to say, we need to spend more time with people around us. Like, we don't know how this is going to go, but we need to strengthen our community ties and do in-person events, go have drinks with those friends that you don't see very often, smile at people at work. And what it's done for me is I have like lived all over the world. And so I speak enough languages where I can, like just today, I spoke Spanish to one of the young men that cleans our lunchroom at the place where I work. And I talk to him every day. And he is from Central America. And he asked me, we know each other from that position. I wouldn't probably have taken the time to intentionally get to know him as well as or have as many conversations if it hadn't been how I'm pretty sure I haven't asked him, but are you afraid to come to work? Are you afraid that ICE could raid our bill? I mean, I just know many of my Latino friends are afraid to leave their homes. My kids had friends that were not coming to school for most of the semester. Now we're on summer break, right? But and so that's caused me to be more intentional to reach out, and I've seen other people do that. I have another friend at work. He's from Indonesia, and he's from Sumatra, and so I went from speaking Spanish to him to speaking Indonesian to that, and just to let people know, especially immigrants in my community, that you're welcome here. In fact, you've lived here longer than I have. So, yeah, and I think that I've seen people going out of their way more to be friendly to people who have come here from around the world. And so that's been a positive thing that gives me hope. We're seeing more effort around bilingual education. I've been to a nonprofit dinner around that about a month ago. So some initiatives, I think kind of what I was overseas when Obama became president, but I heard, there were just, it shook things up when you have a president that's different, that society changes and adapts in certain ways. And so I think that we're seeing some of that. And I would just say, even today, one of the things that I think I'm going to give Trump credit for, it's like even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? But pulling the national half the National Guard out of California is, that's a good act of governance. Like take them all, but at least half are gone. It was like 2000.
Yeah.
It's a signal that we really can't let federal overreach turn our state into a militarized zone. So, I'm a leader in talent development. I see this also from the lens of psychological safety. When governments use military presence to assert power over communities, our own people, this is in the tyranny playbook. It's scary, but especially when they go after immigrants and among us, and this breeds fear, not flourishing. It's the opposite of the conditions we need to build the next generation of innovators. So I think pulling out the National Guard, half of them, maybe it's because, JD Vance came to Disneyland and decided we weren't a hellhole after all. And so they pulled him out. But
Yeah. Oh my God. It shouldn't take this much work to think about what we're hopeful for. Um, I will say though that June 14th was a great day. Here in Santa Clarita, I've shared this on the show before. There's a big major intersection, arguably the biggest, that at times has been called Good Trouble Corner. And it's where, when there are protests, that's where folks gather. The most I've ever seen gather there prior to June 14th was maybe about 200 people. Uh, Probably less than that, but like 150, 200 people. June 14th, there was easily 2,500 people there. Easily, if not more. Maybe as many as 3,500. Went all the way down McBean, all the way down Valencia, both ways. And folks were just there. And we were exercising our First Amendment rights to peaceably assemble, our right to free speech, our right, it was just a really great display. And then I went later that afternoon. Here's an interesting thing, and again, forgive listeners, bear with me because you've heard this part before. But that afternoon, I went to a small gathering of about 25 people. Three of our five city council members were there. It was a nice gathering, but the three, I think four out of five, maybe all five, but these three I know very, very well. Now, technically, they're supposed to be unaffiliated politically, but they're all actually Republicans. They're like Fox News watching, Trump supporting Republicans. In fact, one just announced that he's running for California 27, our U.S. House seat, as a Republican. But they were all like, "Hey, wasn't that great today?" Folks came out and exercised their First Amendment rights, and I saw that later that day. Not only was there not destruction, there wasn't even litter. Like it was like totally. It was totally peaceful. It was a great protest, and so many people that were gathered there. That gave me that gave me hope that we know how to do this, right? It also gave me hope the fact that we were able to do it. As much as I could be concerned about real concrete threats to our constitutional rights, we were still able to gather, and we had police that were going through that area on a regular enough basis to make sure that we were kept safe. Because there were some cars that drove by that could have posed a threat, but it was all peaceful. So that definitely gave. Now, the other side of that though is when I was at that gathering that afternoon. I guess folks, friends of mine who are Trump supporters, saw pictures of me on Facebook or something, and they were just giving me all kinds of crap. Like, hey man, I tell you to go and, solicit some business for us over there. But of the 3,000 people, maybe two or three of them max had a job, all those Democrats, all those Marxists, like saying all these disparaging things. I'm like, guys, these are our friends. These are our neighbors. These are people from they're literally our neighbors. And by the way, ain't it great to exercise our freedom of speech? Ain't it great to peaceably assemble? But the first thing comes to mind for you is to throw stones, to call people names, to generalize, mischaracterize, and vilify. So that's the part of it that I wish I could have held on to that hopefulness, but I wouldn't say I was in despair over how friends of mine, people I consider, people that have literally, I've called up at 3 a.m. when I had an urgent need, who came to my family's aid when I had need. And yet there's this other side of them that just, it's like this. I don't know. We're Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde when it comes to this stuff. The worst of us comes out. So
Mm.
yeah, that kind of ruined it for me. Not, I wouldn't say ruined it because I'm still talking about June 14th and it was a great day. Um, Speaking of Santa Clarita, oh, sorry, did you have something to add, Laura?
No.
Oh, okay. I don't want to step on, I want to make sure I'm not stepping on you. So speaking of Santa Clarita, on Monday, I think it was, a very influential pastor named John MacArthur. A lot of folks may have heard of him. If you're Christian, you certainly heard of him because there's been the John MacArthur Bible. Note John MacArthur Bible, his name above the Bible.
It's wild.
Wild, right? Anyway, sorry, I shouldn't speak ill of the recently deceased, but Johnny Mac
It's
passed
okay.
away.
I will.
Okay. All right. I was a little ambivalent about doing this, but I think it's worth reading. A family that I was close with and did ministry with. The I was very close with the mom. She was in a ministry that I led for about 15 years at Grace Baptist Church, which originally was a church plant of the original Grace community that Johnny Mack led for almost 50 years, I think. Or maybe, no, actually almost 60 years, and I think about it. But we did ministry. And then my parents subsequently got close with the parents. One of the sons was in the same ministry. And then the older son I've kept in touch with as well. He wrote a tribute. I don't know if I'm going to read this whole thing. You know, I'll roll with it. He wrote, I've been debating whether or not to post this, but in light of all that so many women have had to endure as they've gone public with their stories of abuse, there's a small way to stand in solidarity with them. It's not too much to say that all my formative years were spent in the spiritual shadow of John MacArthur. He was my first pastor, and I ended up attending the college he had molded into a place where young men could be trained to preach the Bible like him with absolute certainty. I owe much of my love for studying the Bible to him and the culture he created through the various institutions that made up his empire. At the same time, myself and so many of my friends and classmates have spent decades unpacking the harmful spiritual baggage that we were left with from our time in his orbit. The post goes on. I might put a link to it in the show notes because it does go on for a bit, but just getting to that point, and he goes on to describe specific instances of how he spent most of his adult life now. I'm estimating he's probably about 10 years younger than me. So this has got to be about the last 20 years or so, as he calls it, unpacking the harmful spiritual baggage that we were left with from our time in his orbit. But yeah, I talk about ambivalence. I mean, that's where I spent the first 10, 15 years of my life as a Christian. A lot of folks went to the master's seminary, it was master's college then, master's university now. And I immediately, because I had been reading my Bible, I grew up in an Orthodox synagogue, but then started reading New Testament as well, obviously, when I became a Christian. And very early on, I found certain things where I was at odds with what Johnny Mack was teaching. Just starting in Genesis 1, just kind of thinking about my people at the foot of Mount Sinai, and even if you take even if you take the story on face value and you get the people at the foot of Mount Sinai hearing the voice of God himself, saying, the word day, I guarantee you not one of those people at the foot of Mount Sinai, 2 million or so people, not one of them said, I wonder if he means a literal 24-hour day, So I don't know. That's kind of a humorous way to put it, but a more serious one is I've shared my struggles with mental illness. When I first realized that there might be something more than just, oh, I'm sad today, or I'm sad this week, or I'm sad this month. In some cases, I'm sad this year. I was struggling with the possibility of clinical depression. You know what the first response was? When I brought it to, this was 2002 or so, it was, you don't have a depression issue, you have a sin issue.
Terrible.
So anyway, Laura, I'll let you take it from there. I mean, there've been, I know that that's something that hits John MacArthur and other leaders like him, hit really close to home for you as well, but in a very different way. So
Well, I just want to first acknowledge what you just shared with us and hold space for that because it's crushing. I can only imagine how you felt when you're so desperate for your community to help you when you're suffering and to be told it's victim blaming, it's spiritually abusive, it's emotionally abusive, verbally abusive. And when you're already down, I just don't understand this kicking people when they're down. This is not Jesus at all. And I just hate that you experienced that. And I know that you're not alone because others have. And if they've told their stories publicly or they've held them privately in their own hearts because it's so difficult to even express that. And you needed a community to come around you at that time and you didn't have that. And your spiritual community, most of all, should be that space. And I hate that you didn't receive that when you brought it up so vulnerably. And then, John MacArthur, the reason I don't have trouble saying bad things about him, even though he's just recently passed, is because he was so much of what is wrong with the evangelical church in the United States, the white evangelical church. He's been a very prominent figure in complementarianism, very much discriminating toward women and encouraging others who are, studying to be pastors in the seminary that he's been a part of, women in his own church that were experiencing domestic violence, afraid for their own children, with the, husbands they were married to, the fathers of their children, and then John MacArthur and his staff being ones who coerced them to stay with their husbands even when they were unsafe. And that should be a refuge, but instead, the complicity with abuse in the homes and in the church is why so many women in particular are leaving the church because it's become less safe. When you measure the cost, the risk management of it all, it's not safe to put your kids or even go for marital advice or mental health support in spaces that are in ones like he fostered at Grace Community Church. So you have, a lawsuit that's come, I guess probably more than one, but there's this, one woman in particular who says that she had shared confidential information about her marriage and that her own safety and that of her children. And she was publicly shamed, and that information was shared that shouldn't have been shared, that should have been kept confidential, that put her life and her children's lives at risk. Meanwhile, censoring the husbands even when they're abusive because of this very complementarian theology, which sees men in a hierarchy over women that's God ordained, and not trusting and believing women and helping them be safe along with the children, is why I don't have trouble speaking badly about him because even though he's gone now, the grief that he will never make things right, that repair will never come for all of these survivors and people who know and love them that longed for that for them too, is now not going to happen in this lifetime. So, God will be the judge of what he's done. But in the meantime, all the bombs that he set off, the rubble is left of what he threw grenades into. And these are the lives of people. They're picking up the pieces of their lives and now having to grieve this, what will never be.
Yeah. Yeah. Will, I'm curious if Josh was here, our good buddy Josh, do you think he'd feel differently? Do you think he'd have a different take? I mean, I'm not asking you to speak for him. I'm just wondering, or I don't know, or
No,
maybe.
no, I don't, I'm not really sure what his take was. I mean, Josh is my co-host, by the way, for anybody curious. Um, he's not my, yeah, he's my co-host.
We
In
couldn't
case
pull
there were
it
any
off, man.
rumors,
Your partner. He's your partner. Let's just do it. Let's everybody write
we're
into
going to
Josh
start
Bertram.
banning you along with Chip and Joanna Gaines.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. People are gonna ban my show. It's like, oh,
You're
now
canceled now.
I'll only have three listeners. Uh,
No, but Josh is still, he still identifies as a conservative. He's a pastor. He's,
Mhm.
so
Yeah,
that's
no,
why I'm curious what Josh might say.
I'm not really sure what he would say. What I do know, and I'm normally not one to share private conversations, but I sent him the article this morning because he's at a retreat this week, and his response was, "Dang, that's about as much as we talked about it
Okay.
at this point." But what I will say, the only thing I know about John MacArthur, and I learned this from Anthea Butler. and the Abella came on our show a couple years ago, and we started talking about, white evangelical racism. She wrote a great book about it. But then we talked about his like line of ham in the Bible and kind of like how blacks were viewed, like in a lot of the promulgation of slavery, Jim Crow, and just this misinterpretation of the Bible. And from her telling, that was a theology that he held.
By the
Uh,
way, I'm the only reason I'm smiling, by the way, is because I caught Lori. Like that wasn't just an eye roll. That was like a full body eye roll. I think that's a full that your teenage kids would be proud of.
55% of communication is body language. So I didn't have to say a word.
Sorry, that was just epic. Okay, go on, Will. Sorry about
No,
that.
no, that was all I was going to say about him. I mean, I don't really have anything smart to say about who he is as a person because I didn't grow up Christian. So a lot of the influence and stuff that you are aware, that he's had, it's an empty space for me.
Oh man, it's ubiquitous in Santa Clarita and beyond. I think, yeah, his influence, his impact can be felt not just in the churches around here, but in the politics, in the coffee shop. Like you just can't get away from it. So many other churches that have spread out now, literally around the world, are fellows that have been, trained by him, and then trained by guys who've been trained by him several generations now. So I have to admit, there are some times where I envy the certainty. I wish I had that level of certainty. Maybe I wouldn't be as ambivalent all the time. But if I was that certain, I wouldn't be Jewish. Like I don't know. So yeah, it touches a nerve. Well, okay. So I know that we're under a little bit of a time constraint here. And I knew that this would happen. We haven't even talked about podcasting. We haven't even geeked out about because we're all podcasters. We should be, I mean, we could spend 3 hours just like, hey, what did you learn this week? And what did you learn? But so we haven't even gotten into that. All right. I'll give you a choice. We can either do a real quick geek out about podcasting, or I get to ask you my TPNR question, talk politics and religion without killing each other question. Which one do you want to do? We only have time for one.
Dealer's choice.
You choose.
Oh, geez, you're putting that on me. Okay, we're doing TPNR.
Okay.
Since we talked about some heavy stuff today, what do you think each of us can do to be able to share space with, have better conversations with, and perhaps even nurture relationships with people across our differences? So that's people who have different backgrounds and beliefs than we do, who get their news from different sources than we do. How can we do better at talking politics and religion without killing each other? Or is it even possible?
I feel like it has to, I still believe. I'm still optimistic. But at the same time, I have strong boundaries on how I approach that because of how I have been hurt by close friends, people in my faith community, people even in a previous work environment. It's not always safe to have these conversations. But I do find that there are spaces where that can happen. And I think some of the parameters I put around it are let's really listen to understand each other and try our best to empathize and imagine what it's like for the other person and try to I don't know if you've ever gone to like these marriage enrichment retreats. It's basic communication. Like, what did your spouse say? Repeat it back to them. Like, I train on some of this even in the workplace where I work globally. It's listen to the facts, feelings, and values being expressed. Ask clarifying questions. Like, really understand their position. It actually is what I use with my teenagers because teenagers are known for having very strong opinions. They don't last, but they're very strong. And I love strong opinions, but it's hard when they're very opposite of mine. I think we mostly feel that way, right? And so um, I think that when we can empathize with one another, we suddenly realize, oh, you're dogmatic about speaking and using your voice and not being told that you have to speak a certain way because you were so silenced in trauma as a child or in a work environment. So then I can empathize with that and I can relate to that. And I get that dogmatism is a response to trauma because I have a trauma-informed certification. I worked in tsunami disaster relief. I understand that when life is out of control, having a system that is very clear, whether it's Republican MAGA system or evangelical systems, it's very comforting when the world seems to be spinning out of control. And I can empathize with that too, even though I don't have those positions. I can understand it. And I think that's where I have hope for some of those conversations.
That's really good. Yeah. Seek to understand, really exercise to practice understanding. I went into a conversation just yesterday. There was a good buddy of mine, and things were getting kind of out of hand online. So I said, "Hey, man, let's go grab a drink." So we went, and I thought about not what I wanted to say to him, or points I wanted to score, or points I wanted to make, but I went in kind of prepping my mindset and my heart set, and that is to your point about boundaries. Boundaries also have to do with communicating your boundaries, expectations, and needs as well. So I went in with a disposition and a kind of a readiness of wanting to practice understanding, and rehearsing in my head, not the points that I wanted to make, but like rehearsing in my head, like listening carefully enough to what he was trying to say, and then communicating to him in a way that he knew I was hearing him and understanding him. But I also made it clear what I would need, and that is, hey man, I'm going to do my absolute best to understand you, and I bet that if I understand you, I'm going to respect you because I already love you. But I'm going to ask a favor, and if you're not able to do it, that's all right. It's on me, but I'm going to ask you anyway. And that is, will you do your best to understand me? Like, if we don't have time to get to that part, that's cool too. But I'm just kind of putting it out there. And he's like, yeah, man, let's have a drink. So we got to it. It's great. And I did understand him better. So that's where I got a clear, what I was saying before about that clear understanding of him feeling like getting beat up rhetorically for the last 5, 10, 15 years of, you should this and you should that. And why don't you that? So I got a better understanding of that, but understanding, but also communicating the person that I think I'm understanding better. But just the fact that I'm trying, it is amazing. It's like this. I'm going to say it's not. I was going to say magical power, but it's not magical. It's literally like a brain chemistry thing that happens, like a neurological thing that happens when someone feels heard.
Hmm.
There's like this neurological thing that happens. Someone referred to it recently. I think it was Pastor Paget who referred to it recently as the love chemical or something like that.
The
You know how Fox News,
oxytocin,
something like
the
that. Yeah,
bonding hormone.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Fox News does the other thing where they appeal to the anger and fear
Yeah.
stuff, and they stimulate that, and that
Yeah.
it's kind of like crack, and it keeps people keep coming back for more. We can do the opposite and appeal to the love chemical by just
We
anyway.
can.
Yeah, so that was good. Or maybe it just seemed that way because I had a healthy sized vodka.
It doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt. Well,
Hmm.
how do we
Uh,
talk politics and religion without killing each other, or is it even possible?
I'll keep it short, just because I know we're
Oh,
at
crap.
time.
Sorry.
I will say the best way to talk religion and politics without killing each other is just make an agreement when you're talking to somebody that nobody's mind will be changed. So that way you lower the temperature and the
Hmm.
expected outcomes. So that way, you're just exchanging ideas. You're not making arguments. So
Yeah. That's a good one. I'll try
It's
that.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I know we're up against it. I apologize. I'm already 2 minutes over. But before we go, how can folks follow you, find more information about all the great work you're doing, Lori?
You can find me at laurieadamsbrown.com or my podcast, A World of Difference. I'm more active on LinkedIn than some of the other social medias, so would love to connect.
Great, I'll put that in the show notes. And Will, how can we find you and follow all the great work that you're doing?
We're on all the social media places. Faithofpolitics.com is where you'll find most of the stuff. We try to fashion ourselves as a bit of an educational sort of show. So if you go to our website and you want to look at the entire religion timeline in America, it's something we created. We've got certain collections that focus on certain topics like racial reconciliation, Christian nationalism, abortion, LGBTQ, very focused topics where we've spoken to a lot of experts about stuff. So if you are looking to get into the conversation and just don't know where to start, go to our website and yeah, check out what we got there.
Sounds good. And I'll put those links in the show notes as well. This was really great. I'm not saying this just to say so long and be nice. I'm saying it because I really wish, I hope for this, that we do this on a regular basis. Maybe like every day. No, I'm just kidding. But like, I don't know, like once a quarter, maybe. I don't know. To like, let's pick something realistic because I think this is just
Yeah.
a really healthy exercise. And first of all, I just love hanging out with you. So,
Hey,
Same.
if I
yeah.
could steal some of your audience, that'd be great.
No, we should be stealing each other's audience. Hey,
That's right.
as someone
Share
said to
this.
Pete Seeger one time, hey, they're stealing your song. He goes, they might be stealing from me, but I steal from everybody. So, so this is great, guys. And as always, if you dig what we're doing, remember to follow this show, write that review, do all the things. You can watch the conversations on YouTube. It's youtube.com/at politics and religion. And I am at Corey S. Nathan at COREYS as in Sam and ATHAN. That's on all the socials as well as Substack. Now go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect, and have a great week.